Eraserhead might just be the strangest movie ever made. When David Lynch started it, Hollywood dismissed the project as a waste of time. Too weird to finish and too confusing for anyone to care about. But they were dead wrong. Stick around to hear a fact revealing something about this movie that will be locked away forever. Number 1. It took 5 years to finish. Calling the production of Eraserhead long is like calling being buried alive a little claustrophobic. It dragged on for 5 years. 5 years of artistic purgatory where everyone slowly realized they might die in a horse stable without even getting paid. Not because Lynch was lazy, but because money kept evaporating. The set mutated and the roof leaked so badly mushrooms started sprouting in the corners, which was fitting since the entire production already smelled like mildew and despair. You half expect the crew to have started eating the mushrooms out of starvation just to take the edge off the creeping madness. There was even a scene where Jack Nance opens a door, and the next shot was filmed over a year later. Meanwhile, Lynch had gone full starving artist hermit. He couldn't afford an apartment, so he moved into the set like some kind of surreal squatter king. That creepy, hissing radiator in Henry's room? Yeah, that was also Lynch's space heater/life support system. And because obsession is just another word for masochism, he once spent an entire year editing a single 60-second sequence, just to make it feel, in his words, like breathing underwater. Which is perfect because by then everyone involved probably wanted to drown. Number 2. The script started as a fever dream. Before it mutated into the nightmare lullaby we call Eraserhead, David Lynch's first draft was a semi-coherent story called Gardenback. It came from a fever dream about a jealous husband, which already sounds like a Lifetime movie if Lifetime were directed by Satan. But Lynch quickly realized things like plot and dialogue were just annoying distractions from his real mission, injecting raw industrial-strength dread straight into your eyeballs. So he gutted the thing like a fish. He threw out the narrative and the chit-chat, and what was left was a 21-page skeleton rattling around with nothing but pure atmosphere. On set, there were no lines to rehearse. Instead, Lynch would creep up to Jack Nance and whisper bizarre ideas in his ear like some avant-garde demon, then immediately scream, "Action!" He wasn't directing a movie. He was basically conducting a seance. And the result was a film that makes absolutely zero sense if you try to watch it with your brain on. But if you let it bypass logic, well, it just becomes the best movie ever. Honestly, it's less a movie and more a cinematic panic attack. And that's exactly why it works. Number 3. The first executive screening was a funeral. When Eraserhead was finally finished, David Lynch had to show it to the American Film Institute, the same people who had bankrolled this fever dream against their better judgment. The screening wasn't a premiere so much as a funeral procession for their money. The reaction was so poor, and when the credits rolled, there wasn't a single clap, just stunned silence. The executives walked out, looking like they'd just seen their 401ks go up in flames. One of them begged Lynch to add a cheery voiceover to explain what's happening. Another suggested swapping out the Industrial Nightmare soundtrack for upbeat jazz, because nothing says severed baby monster like a trumpet solo. Lynch, calm as a man who definitely sleeps next to radiators, thanked them for their galaxy-brained feedback. Then he immediately took the master print, locked it away, and made sure they couldn't get their grubby little hands on it. Because if he hadn't, Eraserhead might have ended up as a laugh-track sitcom where the mutant baby delivers zingers between saxophone riffs. Number 4. Night shoots were silent films. To create that suffocating, oppressive atmosphere, the night shoots were done in complete eerie silence. The crew wasn't even allowed to whisper. Instead, they communicated with hand signals and frantic mime, basically playing a deranged game of charades where the wrong guess meant ruining the shot. This was all to protect the sound recording. Lynch himself often acted as the special effects guy, hiding just out of frame under the set with his hand on a pedal that would release bursts of steam at the perfect moment. This means that every single sound you hear was recorded live. Every hiss from the radiator, every metallic clang, every creepy drip, it was all happening right there. There was no post-production sound work for that stuff. The end result is a soundscape that doesn't feel designed at all. It feels disturbingly real, like the building itself is trying to kill you, which, given the state of that rotting stable, might not have been acting. Number 5. Jack Nance's hair was not a wig. That iconic standing-on-end monument to anxiety on Henry Spencer's head was not a wig. That was 100% Jack Nance's real hair, tortured into that shape every single day. The person responsible for this was Nance's wife at the time, Catherine Coulson, later famous as the Log Lady from Twin Peaks. Every morning, she'd spend 2 hours backcombing his scalp into oblivion and shellacking his hair with industrial-strength hairspray. The process was so uncomfortable that Nance would just sit there in silence with tears rolling down his cheeks. The dark joke on set was that the daily hair-related agony was what kept him so perfectly in character. In a grimly fitting end to the story, after 5 long years of production, Jack Nance and Catherine Coulson got divorced right after the film wrapped. Turns out love can survive poverty, stress, and 5 years of mushroom-infested stables, but not 5 years of Aquanet. Number 6. The Secret of the Mutant Baby. The grotesque, squealing mutant baby in Eraserhead is one of cinema's most infamous mysteries. David Lynch has never revealed how he made it, which only fueled rumors more unhinged than the movie itself. The juiciest theory is that it was built from an actual embalmed calf fetus Lynch scored from a local butcher, because when you need disturbing, the deli counter just isn't enough. You know, for that authentic, organic look. This was then decorated with rubber tubing and operated with hidden air bladders to make it squirm and breathe. To keep it from rotting under the hot lights, the prop was kept in a big refrigerated Tupperware container between takes. It had its own little plastic morgue. As the shoot dragged on, the smell got so bad that no amount of Lysol could cover it up. When it was all over, Lynch didn't just throw the prop away. He gave it a proper burial in his own backyard. So yes, somewhere in a quiet LA garden, there is a tiny cursed grave. Number 7. Inspiration behind the mutant baby. Lynch's daughter, Jennifer, born in 1968, came into the world with clubbed feet and had to undergo multiple surgeries as a baby to correct them. For most parents, that kind of ordeal just leads to stress, medical bills, and an unhealthy relationship with hospital vending machines. For David Lynch, it also may have planted the seed of Eraserhead's deformed, screaming mutant baby. Many people are of the opinion that Eraserhead was Lynch's way of channeling the very real terror of new parenthood, especially when your newborn comes with medical complications that make every cry sound like a siren. In other words, while most parents cope by buying a baby monitor, Lynch coped by creating one of the most grotesque cinematic infants in history. Because nothing says working through my fears like immortalizing them in black and white nightmare fuel. Number 8. Backward dialogues. During production, David Lynch got a little bored and decided to mess with the natural order of things by playing dialogue backwards. Nothing ever made it into this particular film, thankfully sparing audiences the mental gymnastics of deciphering Nicholson as I am looking. But like a mad scientist scribbling in a notebook, he tucked the idea away for decades, eventually unleashing it on Twin Peaks, where it added that signature Lynchian creepiness, because nothing says small-town charm like a demon whispering nursery rhymes in reverse. Number 9. Dissecting a cat for research. To get a better sense of how skin and bone and blood really looked, David Lynch knew he had to see it for himself. Before shooting, he reportedly found a dead cat and performed his own private dissection. He wasn't being morbid for the sake of it. He was a painter trying to get the details right to understand the texture of organic matter. It was this commitment to grim authenticity that would define the entire production and give the film's most infamous creation its disturbingly realistic quality. Number 10. The Wall Street Journal paper route. During one of the many times the production ran out of cash, David Lynch took matters into his own hands. To raise the money to buy more film stock, he took a job delivering The Wall Street Journal. The director of one of history's great cinematic nightmares had a nightly paper route that earned him about $48 a week. Because he insisted on only shooting at night, he would have to call a halt to the production, go out to deliver the news about the stock market, and then return to the set to continue orchestrating his surreal horror show. All right, if your brain is already starting to feel like scrambled eggs and the room is looking a little wobbly, do me a solid and dissect that like button. Let the algorithm know you're one of the weird ones. Because the story only gets stranger from here, and number 15 involves Stanley Kubrick basically committing film theft for his own twisted purposes. Number 11. The Uncredited Heroine. Behind every great weird man is often an even more patient woman who's actually paying the bills. Catherine Coulson wasn't just Jack Nance's personal hairstylist. During the film's long unpaid breaks, she worked full-time as a waitress to support them. After a long shift, she'd come to the set and work all night, helping with lighting, giving actors their cues, and reapplying the hairspray poison to her husband's head. She was a one-woman support system, an essential part of the tiny team that saw the movie through to the end. And for all that sacrifice and hard work, her name was nowhere in the original credits. It was a classic indie film oversight, but for years, one of the production's most important figures went completely unrecognized. Number 12. The Satanic Panic Investor. Trying to get money for a movie like Eraserhead was, shockingly, not very easy. At one point, Lynch got a private investor to put up $5,000, but then the guy actually read the script. He immediately called Lynch in a panic and pulled his money, claiming the script was satanic and that he was terrified of being associated with a movie that was clearly a direct portal to hell. Now, a normal director might have tried to reassure him. Lynch, being Lynch, decided to mess with him instead. He deliberately added more weird religious-looking images to the film, like a bleeding tree stump, just to freak the guy out even more. It worked. The investor got so spooked that he completely ghosted them and never even asked for his $5,000 back. Number 13. The premiere was carnage. When Eraserhead finally premiered at a film festival, it was not exactly a hit. To put it mildly, the screening was a train wreck. The movie's slow, grinding pace and oppressive vibe acted as a powerful audience repellent. Almost half the theater walked out in the first 20 minutes. The reviews were even worse. One famous critic wrote that watching it was like watching paint dry on a corpse. The film seemed dead on arrival. But then a funny thing happened. The movie was like a brain parasite. It wouldn't leave people alone. A year later, that same critic published his top 10 list, and right there on it was Eraserhead. He wrote that the film had rewritten his DNA, and that his first review was a failure on his part. It was the first sign that this wasn't a movie you just watch. It's a movie you get infected by. Number 14. Discontinued film stock. That beautiful, high-contrast black and white look wasn't just an artsy choice. It was a choice born of desperation. Lynch was shooting on a specific kind of film stock that he loved, but there was one small problem. They didn't make it anymore. He managed to buy the last batch in existence from a TV station that went bankrupt. But it wasn't enough. When he inevitably ran out of the special stock mid-production, he had to switch to a newer, flatter-looking kind of film. To hide the change, Lynch and his cinematographer came up with a genius solution. They just printed the new footage so incredibly dark that it crushed all the detail, making it impossible for anyone to tell the difference. When in doubt, just make it darker. Number 15. Stanley Kubrick's secret weapon. This is where the legend of Eraserhead really takes off. Its biggest fan turned out to be Stanley Kubrick. While he was getting ready to shoot The Shining, Kubrick was looking for something to show his cast and crew to get them in the right headspace. He found Eraserhead. He managed to borrow David Lynch's own personal 35mm print of the film and just kept it for months. On set, he started a new ritual. Every Friday night, he'd make everyone watch Eraserhead to prepare them for a week of shooting at the Overlook Hotel. It was basically mandatory psychological conditioning. Jack Nicholson later said of the experience, "That thing crawled under my skin and built a nest." If a movie is weird enough to freak out Jack Nicholson, it's weird enough for anyone. Number 16. The Man Who Won't Explain. For over 40 years, everyone has tried to figure out what Eraserhead is about. Is it a metaphor for fear of fatherhood? The horrors of industrialization? A really, really bad breakup? Everyone has a theory. And for 40 years, Lynch's response has basically been a polite, "Nope, not telling." When he's pushed to explain it, he always gives the same beautiful non-answer. It's a dream of dark and troubling things. He absolutely refuses to nail it down to one meaning, because he knows that explaining a nightmare is the fastest way to make it not scary. He just sips his coffee, smiles, and leaves the mystery intact. Number 17. The superhero sequel that almost was. This might be the single weirdest fact on this entire list. Someone once seriously pitched David Lynch an Eraserhead sequel as a comic book. But wait, it gets better. The pitch was to turn Henry Spencer, a character whose main personality traits are confusion and quiet terror, into a caped superhero who fights crime in his grim industrial city. When Lynch heard this, he didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He just started laughing. And according to the story, he laughed without stopping for 10 full minutes. After he finally pulled himself together, he patted the artist on the shoulder and gently suggested that maybe Batman would be a better fit. The comic, shockingly, never happened. Number 18. Mel Brooks, the unlikely champion. The person who ultimately helped launch David Lynch's career was the most unlikely guy imaginable, Mel Brooks. Yes, the Spaceballs guy, the Blazing Saddles guy. Brooks saw Eraserhead at a midnight screening and was totally blown away. He ran up to Lynch afterwards and yelled, "You crazy SOB, that's the funniest horror film I've ever seen." He saw past the grime and the dread and recognized a fellow filmmaker who did whatever he wanted. This meeting changed everything. Brooks's company was getting ready to make The Elephant Man, and after seeing what Lynch did with no money, Brooks hired him to direct it. It was a move that made no sense to anyone in Hollywood, but it was a stroke of genius, all because the King of Comedy saw something special in the King of Nightmares. Number 19. An X rating for creepiness. When Lynch submitted Eraserhead to the ratings board, they had a problem. The film didn't have the usual stuff that gets you a restrictive rating, no real sex or violence. But the overall vibe was so fundamentally disturbing that the MPAA threatened to give it an X rating simply for general creepiness. It would have been the first time a film was condemned just for being too weird. An X rating would have killed the film in theaters. So Lynch went back and made one tiny change. He trimmed exactly 1 second from a close-up of the baby. 1 second. It's completely invisible. It changes nothing. But that tiny, meaningless sacrifice was enough for the board. They gave him an R rating, and Lynch held a grudge against censors for the rest of his life. Number 20. The Lost DNA. After 5 years, when the nightmare was finally over, Lynch did one last thing. He gathered up every single scrap of material from the production, all the outtakes, the leftover film, the sound experiments, even the baby's Tupperware coffin. He boxed it all up, drove to a random storage facility in Los Angeles, and rented a unit under a fake name. For decades, that lockbox has been the holy grail for fans. People have offered money for it, tried to track it down, but it's a ghost. Lynch himself just says with a little smile that he lost the key years ago. Right. So somewhere in LA, sitting behind a locked metal door, is the raw, uncut soul of Eraserhead, locked away forever. And here's a bonus fact before you go. After 5 years, the film premiered and even won over the one and only Stanley Kubrick. In fact, while making The Shining, Kubrick screened it for his cast and crew every Friday night, using its bizarre energy to fuel Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall's performances. So there you have it. What part of this legend gets under your skin? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to immortalize that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into cinematic madness, and we'll see you on the next one.
Wow, that was weird.